He does that consistently, Jeff. He does what he needs to do to win a particular football game. I'm very impressed by that. A lot of coaches don't do that. Do you
John,
see that as well?
Yeah, I think it goes back to an even bigger part of he doesn't have the ego.
A Monday get-together on Birds 365 as the Philadelphia Eagles stay undefeated after taking care of the Jacksonville Jaguars in the rain, the slop, the mess that was Lincoln Financial Field. Doesn't matter because the Birds are 4-0 and the only undefeated team in the NFL. Here to help us break down how the Eagles have been able to become the best team in the National Football League. I'm saying that because I believe it and because the standings say it. Doesn't mean they're going to stay there, but that's what they're going to try and do. Here to give us the breakdown on how we've gotten to where we're at is Geoff Mosher from InsideTheBirds.com and the Inside the Birds podcast. You knew the Eagles were going to be the best team in the NFL 4 games in, right, Moshe?
Of course. Absolutely.
Yeah, we all predicted it, didn't we? Actually, Jody did. He bet on Eagles-Dolphins Super Bowl, so he's still he's in the mix. I'm impressed by that. Yeah, I didn't see this.
Way to jinx it early, Jody. Nice job.
Nonetheless, this has looked like the best team in the NFL, Geoff Mosher. What impressed you most about that? Is a difficult environment to play in, adversity, get down 14-0, 200 rushing yards against the best rushing defense, 5 turnovers against the team with the best turnover ratio. What impressed you the most about that effort?
Yeah, you said it in there, Johnny, which was the 200 rushing yards against the best rushing defense, which is sort of a copycat to their victory last year over the New Orleans Saints, which was kind of considered one of their few signature victories of last year. Saints came in with the top-ranked rushing defense, and the Eagles carved it apart. And those numbers are actually, for once in maybe a year or since Jalen Hurts became the starter, those numbers are not inflated by Jalen Hurts' rushing.
Yeah.
He only had 38 yards on 19 carries. So if you take Jalen Hurts out of the mix, the running backs themselves actually had an even better day as far as a yards per carry average. And this was not a Jacksonville team that you could do that to. So when you sort of take a zoom out look, what really stands out about the Eagles to me is that, they're not a perfect team. There is no perfect team. They have flaws, but in a pinch, when things aren't going well, whether it's they're unstable offensively in the passing game or there's so much rain that it's making it difficult to play, they've got this fallback where they can just run the ball, and it's very, very difficult for even the best run teams to just stop them when they decide they're going to run the ball and run right at you.
And you mentioned a running game about average yards per carry. How about Trey Sermon coming in? I know it's only 2 carries, but haven't seen the guy yet. Comes in, breaks off 2 good runs, keeps the chains moving. That tells you how good the Eagle offensive line yesterday was, because I think John McMullen could have gotten 4 yards.
I don't know about that, but I probably could get I probably wouldn't lose yardage. I could fall forward.
No, I mean, how about Trey? But really, how about Miles Sanders? I mean, how about the year that Miles Sanders is having? I think he's debunking a lot of the myths about him that he's not a tough runner. He's always been a tough runner. I think he's always been a good inside runner. The myth is that he's a hole dancer. He's a guy who's so jittery. No, he's a guy who's had trouble following his blocks correctly and finding the right lanes, but he's never been like a scat back type. He's just, his thing has been durability. And so far this year, you saw yesterday, career high in both carries and yards. And of course, he's playing behind a great offensive line. But what separates him from any other running back that the Eagles have is that even if you spot him the 3 or 4 yards because of the line, as you saw in the 35-yard run, he has a second gear that nobody else on the Eagles has. Trey Sermon is not that kind of runner. Kenny Gainwell does not have that explosion, or at least if he does, we have not seen it yet.
No.
Kenny Gainwell is the most fascinating third down back I've ever seen. He actually doesn't catch the ball well, but runs really well between the tackles, which is the antithesis of a third down back. But that's a story for another time. Miles Sanders, if it's his last year, he's doing his best to get his contract, and the Eagles are doing their best to get as much mileage out of him as possible.
It's going to be a difficult decision because Miles does have that chip on his shoulder. He is playing very well. I think, and by the way, all of a sudden, now that Miles is playing with some confidence and, he's kind of feeling it, starting to catch the football as well.
Yep.
And that has been an issue. And yeah, way back in the summer, Motion, you were at training camp a bunch, and there was this narrative that Eagles fans say, "Hey, I hope Kenny Gainwell can." It's not close. Miles is the best running back on this team.
Yeah.
And I kept saying it and saying it and saying it. People are starting to see it. But what impressed me most, and I was telling Jody this before you came on, Nick Sirianni. I was on with Seth Joyner on our pregame show and listened to Jeff on Inside the Birds podcast and his pregame show. I was telling Seth, the thing that impresses me most about Nick Sirianni is he'll do anything to win a particular game. So, Seth was saying they're going to run him 15, 16 times. That's it. And typically, I agree. They want to keep him ready for 17 games. That's optimal. But you're not expecting a monsoon on the first Sunday of October. He needed to run the football. He ran the football career high in carries for Miles Sanders, along with the yards. He does that consistently, Jeff. He does what he needs to do to win a particular football game. I'm very impressed by that. A lot of coaches don't do that. Do you see that as well?
Yeah, I think it goes back to an even bigger part of he doesn't have the ego that a lot of head coaches have, especially young head coaches. I think a lot of times head coaches get hired and they think that they're hired for their play calling expertise. So they want to call plays, right? They want to show people why they were hired. Or in his case, because he came from the Frank Reich umbrella and Frank calls the plays, they want to show you that they can too, even though they didn't have a shot, right? So he did early on last year. Things weren't going well, and he had no problem taking a step back, handing the reins over to Shane Steichen, and being the more quote-unquote CEO head coach. And I thought that was probably the first example we saw of a guy who is not out to prove to anybody anything other than wanting to win games and doing what it takes, like you just said, to win the game. So you're right. I would not have predicted, given the history of Miles Sanders and the lack of trust that they've showed in him in the past, as far as being a high volume carrier and a fourth quarter carrier, that on a day like yesterday, with the wind and the rain and the elements being as bad as they are, and Jacksonville coming in with a hot defense, that yesterday would be the day that Nick Sirianni was going to trust Miles Sanders, right? Especially in the fourth quarter, but he did, because he had no reason at that point not to. So I agree with you. I think he does what it takes to win a game and does not put any extra thought onto how his decisions might look in the media or how he's going to have to rationalize and explain it.
Moshe, I'm glad to have you on today because I appreciate your knowledge of the National Football League, because there was a play in yesterday's game I just didn't understand. Mm-hmm. The touchdown pass to A.J. Brown that was taken off the board because Dallas Goedert stood where he was standing, and it was somehow offensive pass interference. I've been watching National Football League a long time too, and I know the rules are ever changing. Could they not call that on every single play? Aren't there crossing routes in the National Football League where the offensive player comes into some kind of contact with a defender? Because that's all Dallas Goedert did, was he kind of brushed him. There wasn't an attempted pick or any kind of physicality to it. He just kind of stood there, and the defender ran into him, and they called it the offensive pass interference. Can you explain how they make that call in the NFL to me?
So there's two things on that, Jody. One, I was watching the Chiefs game last night. They played the Bucs. I thought somebody, I can't remember which receiver, got nabbed for the same exact thing, where they called him for OPI, and he actually was trying to get out of the way of the opponent.
Yeah, it happened, Moshe, real quick. It happened in the London game as well. In the early game. So they've been. I think
it happened last year.
I think it's a point of emphasis. Yeah,
it is a point of emphasis. The Eagles, Jody, are guilty by reputation. So you saw week one, they ran a ton of RPOs. It's still the backbone of their offense. And then by week two, after the Lions did their little cut-ups and sent them to the NFL, all of a sudden, every time they ran an RPO, they were getting called for a legal man downfield, because the opponent from the week before sent them all the tapes. Hey, you got to watch this. You got to watch this. And once you get on the watch list, it's hard to get off the watch list. So this was an issue for them early last year too. The offensive pass interferences on rub routes and pick plays. So, and it's like holding. There's going to be times where you didn't hold, but you're a left tackle whose reputation is being grabby and something didn't go right, so they're going to flag you, and that's why that happens.
Yeah, I agree with Moshe 100%. Reputation, man. The Eagles have that reputation, and it's going to be very difficult. Dallas had his hands up. Like, you got to be savvy about those things, and you got to just kind of like walk like, and the Eagles, and Nick has talked about it as well, and I give him credit. He hasn't complained about it. He said, for the most part, officials are calling it correctly. They just got to be a little bit more savvy about it, but Jeff, you hit the nail on the head. It's reputation at this point. They have a reputation that they do this, and people are paying more attention to it. Plus, it's a point of emphasis on top of that in the whole league, and they are calling it in a bunch of places. So, hey, they're 4-0, so they've been able to get through it. But that's what we do. We nitpick. So I want to nitpick a little bit more. I keep talking about special teams. It hasn't happened yet. Now, I give the Eagles credit for pulling the trigger on Britton Covey as the kick returner as well. Not that he's doing a great job, but Quez was he's not good at it, and he doesn't seem to like to do it. So I think that's a positive. Aaron Cepas, man, they keep losing this field position game. Sometimes it's the kickoffs. Yesterday it was the punts. Eventually, that's going to bite him in the you-know-what, isn't it? If they keep losing this field position game?
Well, I was thinking yesterday or last night after the game how so many people want to draw comparisons, obviously, to the 2017 team, as they talk about this team, whether it's the run game or the quarterback play. But if you want to do that, the one thing that sort of gets lost in the 2017 sauce is how good Donnie Jones was at punting and putting that ball inside the 10. I think he had set a record that year. Or in a 2-year span for how many punts he was putting inside the 10. And obviously field position became a huge part of the 2017 team and what they were able to do. And you're right, it's not special teams in general is not a big part of this Eagles team. And the third phase is often forgotten until it rears its ugly head in a game that's close. So again, I could see the Eagles having a loss somewhere and its special teams let them down and it'll be complained about. But they like Aaron Cepas over the guy that they used to have punting, whose name escapes me. Is it Cam Johnston? Yeah. So if you remember Cam Johnston's last year, they had Jake Elliott had some issues kicking field goals that year.
Holding.
And what a lot of people didn't realize was that the whole process was not sound. It wasn't just Jake Elliott. They just felt that the process from snap to hold the kick wasn't good. And then as soon as Aaron Cepas became the punter starting last year, Jake Elliott's been a much more reliable kicker. So it's a difficult game to play here as far as, all right, we want to upgrade our punter and find something better than Cepas, but then they have to find somebody that they're really comfortable with being a better punter and a better holder. And if you're going to choose between one or the other or play the give and take, you'd rather make sure that your kicking game is solid. So if there's somebody out there, and they work out guys all the time, if there's someone out there that they feel can come in and be a better punter and at least maintain the same level of holding the snap, then maybe they'll make that move. That's because I agree with you. It sticks out right now that it's not a good part. Everything else seems like a fine-tuned machine except for special teams at the moment.
We love nitpicking, so I might as well nitpick with someone other than the Eagles, and that's our friend at Pro Football Focus. Their cornerback ratings coming into the week, they had Slay as number 3 or 4 in the league. They had their slot corner they didn't end up missing Maddox as much as I thought they would yesterday. They had him top 10. And they had Bradbury way down in the late 20s, like almost 30th cornerback rating in the league. And
That's still pretty good, though. That's still pretty good as a whole.
Good point. Still probably upper third.
Yeah.
Okay. I just think he's been better than that. And his perfectly timed interception yesterday was on point. I keep blaming the missed tackle in the first game against Detroit when he whiffed against DeAndre Swift, as them holding that against him as badly as it did. How good has Bradbury played in your eyes, Jeff?
I think he's been good. I find very few faults with what he's done. I don't know how I try not to even discuss PFF, not out of any disrespect, but I don't know how they make their grades.
Yeah, I
So,
don't think anybody knows.
I'll never
Yeah.
forget the day Aaron Rodgers threw 5 touchdown passes and they gave the guy like a 23.7 rating on a Monday night. That was like 8 years ago. So I don't know how they do it. I just know that when I watch the Eagles defense, maybe it's sort of perhaps PFF takes in what you're being asked to do. And the Eagles are doing a lot of matchup zone, a lot of pattern matching, which is not easy, but it's sort of a way where you're kind of got your man for man until you pass him off to somebody else. So maybe that's graded differently than if you're sticking with your man 20, 30 yards downfield. I really don't know. But if there's some weakness there, then nobody's figured out how to attack it yet.
Yeah. Speaking of Brett, he baited Trevor Lawrence on that throw. He knew exactly what was going on. One of the savviest zone corners in this league. He baited him and he took advantage of a young quarterback. But Moshe, I want to talk about the defense as a whole. Small samples. But they're getting larger. So the Eagles come in to this game as the 5th ranked defense in the NFL. They gave up 219 yards, so I don't know what it is, but it's going to be better than 5 this week. I think Eagles fans don't often look at context in the fact that it's very difficult to play defense in the modern NFL. You see teams going up and down the field. You see teams with 13 seconds left going down the field, winning football games. You leave 24 seconds on the clock. We talk about that London game again. New Orleans is able to go down the field. They almost get a 61-yard field goal, ends in a double doink. It is hard to play defense in this league.
Mm-hmm.
Why does Jonathan Gannon get so much criticism for having a top 5 defense? Last year, with the lack of talent, it was number 10. What more are people expecting?
Yeah, I don't know. I actually felt like over the last 3 weeks, at least from an inside the bird standpoint, the emails we get, the feedback we get, has not been as much criticism of John Gannon in that time span. So we'll see. But I remember, you know this better than anyone, John. Like this is the town of defense, right? This is the town of Buddy Ryan, who didn't win a playoff game, who is still a hero. This is the town of Brian Dawkins. So you can't just be a good defense and get a lot of respect. I mean, you can't get off to a bad start like Jonathan Gannon did last year and just overcome that reputation with a snap of your finger. So, I know that. And the weird thing is they're not blitzing a ton, but they are blitzing more than last year. So you would think that would satisfy some people. But, if the one thing I'll say is about their defense, as good as it's been, it's really helped out by the offense, because the offense right now is a ball control offense. It's a offense that in the second quarter, especially, I think has scored 80 points now. So in 4 weeks, the Eagles have gone into the halftime, usually with the lead and with a hot hand, and gotten the ball back in the third quarter. And that has made opponents feel like they have to pass against the Eagles to get back into games because they're down. Because I do think if the Eagles run into a team, and there are some coming on the schedule. Dallas likes to run regardless. Indianapolis will run with Jonathan Taylor. Tennessee will run with Derrick Henry. So if there is a team that can kind of hang with them for the first half and run the ball and devote to run, we've seen that the Eagles are built to stop the pass more than stopping the run. They're small on the back end. So it'll be interesting to see if they can kind of hold up their end of the bargain against one of those teams that does devote to the run. But again, that team that does devote to the run has to be able to stop the Eagles offense first so that the game isn't out of hand.
All right. Moshe mentioned the fact that the Cowboys will stick to the run, and they did yesterday. And they're 3-1, and the Giants are 3-1. The Eagles are 4-0. They're only one game up in the division. Should we have worries that the NFC least is anything but this year, that at least through 4 weeks, small sample size, it's one of the better divisions of football?
One of the more successful divisions in football?
Yeah, except if the season ended today, Moshe, there would be 3 teams in the playoffs from the NFC East. And by the way, the Eagles would also have the number 3 overall pick, but the season does not end today.
No, that's incredible. All of that. I think that validates what a lot of us have said. We felt that the NFC East was going to be better. I think I even said it last time I was on with you guys. I thought it would not be the joke of the NFL anymore, and it's not. It's not great, but they obviously are not. It's not terrible, and some teams are getting better. One thing I said, I'm pat myself on the back. When Dak went down and everybody said the Cowboys were going to suck and the division's over, I said I don't believe that for a second. I think their defense is one of the best in the NFL. I thought it was going to keep them in games. I didn't think they would be undefeated without Dak, but they're on a good trajectory. That game against the Eagles in a couple of weeks is going to be a really fantastic game, whether Dak plays or not, because their defense is legit and they can stop a running game. We've seen them do that. So I look forward to that. And I think Dallas will be in it until the end with the Eagles there. So that for the first time in a long time, I think that second game between the Cowboys and Eagles is going to be very, very meaningful for both teams.
Yeah, Christmas Eve. Difficult spot for the Eagles, too, because that's in Dallas, and it's the third of 3 consecutive road games. So
Right.
we talk about how easy this schedule is. That little sliver is not easy. That is a very difficult spot. A lot of Penn State. We'll give the Penn State love for Geoff Mosher. Miles Sanders first, Micah Parsons. Micah Parsons is just unblockable. I mean, that guy
he's a beast.
Is an unbelievable football player. So, yeah, the Cowboys and Cooper Rush, by the way, give him credit. Game manager, call him whatever you want. Guys winning football games. So,
yeah,
that's pretty impressive as well. As far as this Eagles team, now every week it's been first it was Jalen Reagor. Well, not as much Jalen, but then it was Carson Wentz, Doug Peterson. Now we're in the Zach Ertz week at Arizona. We keep saying this Eagles team needs to be tested. They did, face adversity and persevered. That was sort of a theme yesterday. So that was a test. Now they go on the road against a good team, not a great team. And the Eagles are favored, and they should be. Is this finally the big test for this team? Arizona coming up?
In the sense that it's a road game, it's a far road game, and they'll get a little dose of their own medicine because, Kyler Murray is the type of guy that can foil a game plan by doing things that Jalen Hurts does, which is, he can throw the ball well, he can run well, you can have the perfect blitz dialed up, he can beat it, you have the perfect coverage dialed up, he can extend the play, but he's also going to make a lot of mistakes, Kyler Murray. So he talent for talent, I don't think that the Cardinals are as good of a 53 or even close to as good of a 53 as the Eagles are. But you're right, and I'm a big law of averages guy. Every time the Eagles win a game, they get closer to losing their first game. It's going to happen. They're not going undefeated this year. Dallas is up in 2 weeks. I don't know if they really get into the whole trap game mentality. But every time they win a game, the next week is a trap game because everybody's talking about, they're winning, they should beat every team. So, I mean, Arizona can present some problems. I do think the Eagles are better, but, if they lose, will I be shocked? No, not at all.
Eagles just have to hope that TJ Watt doesn't have to have his heart shocked again this week.
JJ, that was crazy. That was a crazy story.
And then he went out and played well for Arizona. I watched some of that game in the late window yesterday. All right, Moshe, you touched on it for a second. Again, I need you to explain something that I don't quite understand. Kudos to our guy, Dave Zangaro from NBC Sports. I saw him tweet this yesterday. The Eagles have scored 84 points in the second quarter alone in their 4 games so far this year. The next closest in the history of the National Football League points in the second quarter through 4 games is the 1941 Bears. You got to go back 80 years, and they only scored 71 points. So it's not like they had 1 more point than the all-time highest. No, they had 11 more points.
Yeah.
What the hell? How do you get so good in the second quarter? What does it mean, if anything?
This one I can't help you with. I'm as sort of blown away by it as anybody else is. I tried to rationalize it like 2 weeks ago. Not necessarily the high scoring in the second quarter, but why they weren't scoring much in the second half. That Minnesota game, they drove down the field. They had a field goal block. That's not a lack of offense or taking the foot off the pedal. You just made a mistake. Then the Kenneth Gainwell interception. Again, they were driving the ball. They could have scored. That was a mistake. Then they went and played Washington, and just from watching tape, I think, when you're up by that and you try to sort of run more and take some time off the clock, but you're doing that against Payne and Allen, two really good defensive tackles, gave them issues. And so it kind of, sputtered their defense a little bit. I cannot explain why in the second quarter they come out like gangbusters all the time. They have this unbelievable ability to mix what they're doing. They've had some slow starts, and then all of a sudden it's like a light switch. They turn it on the second quarter. I can guarantee you this, though. That's not going to be how it is every single game for the rest of the year. So, but I'm not saying they have to do anything different. I just think it's like a strange sort of coincidence that is going to wind up evening itself out by the end of the year.
At Geoff Mosher NFL, follow Jeff there on Twitter. Read him, InsideTheBirds.com. Listen to him, Inside the Birds podcast with our buddy Adam Kaplan as well. Last one from me. You mentioned sort of the Eagles' ability in the second quarter, the offensive, how close are we coming to Shane Steichen being the guy in the NFL coaching market in the offseason? Everybody talks about JG because he got 3 different interviews. Well, more than that, but 3 different teams interviewing him. All of a sudden, Shane Steichen, he's going to be the guy if this keeps going. So is it fair to say you got to take advantage of this coaching staff while you still have this coaching staff together?
Yes. I think because the NFL's highly flawed coach selecting process, and
it is flawed. Man,
this sounds like I'm sorry. That sounds like I was about to diss Shane Steichen. I'm not.
No.
Shane Steichen has done a fantastic job, but I'm sure, John, you speak to people around the league like me and Adam do, and it's amazing how many times you mention play calls, play designs, and what the Eagles do, and the first name that comes up is Jeff Stoutland. Not Shane Steichen, not Nick Sirianni. I think he's too much typecast as just an offensive line coach who develops offensive linemen well, which he does. He's a victim of his success. But a lot of what they do schematically, Jeff Stoutland is a much bigger part than people realize. And why he would not be the first guy on that team, given that he's out there. Like, people know who Jeff Stoutland is. You can see his videos it's not like he's a quiet guy you never heard of. Why someone who has those leadership qualities, that football mind, that
Jeff, it's age.
I know, because he's an offensive line coach, but
it's also age too.
Coach.
It's
age
also
is part
age.
of it. It's part. I mean, David Culley got hired by Texas. He was like almost 70. But you're right. It is, the league does trend toward young players. But why somebody wouldn't just say, I got to have Jeff Stoutland leading my team? I can't figure it out. But the Eagles will just be happy with that. But yeah, Steichen probably will get more interviews than Jeff Stoutland. But that to me is the sort of the Wizard of Oz to their success. The guy that nobody really talks about.
Well, the interesting thing about Stout to me, because I kind of, I don't think it's right as somebody with a gray beard. I think there's a little bit of ageism, but what amazes me, if you go back to Eugene Chung, who's not even in this league, or Roy, is why don't people hire Jeff Stoutland's assistants?
Mm-hmm.
They still, if they're looking for a player, Taylor Lewan gets hurt, let's pick up Raven Clark. Detroit had a bunch of injuries, let's pick up Coyote Awasika. Last year or when Miami tried to pilfer Sua Opeta, they just go to Philadelphia and say, well, Stoutland's guys are going to at least know how to surface blocks and things like that.
Yep.
I'm amazed they don't hire as assistants and try to at least, that part to me is really confusing.
I mean, they try to steal everybody else. They try to steal Howie's assistant. They have stolen Howie's assistants left, right, and center. But
They have picked the Eagles front office apart during these last couple off season. You're right on that, Moshe. All right, I need your opinion on this.
Real quick, you might also see Kevin Patullo's name surface, because a lot of people around the league know that Kevin is Nick's right-hand man in the passing game, and you've seen the Eagles be much more dynamic of a passer Jalen Hurts this year.
And he got a Chicago, I believe, interview this offseason.
For their
or it might have been Green Bay or Chicago. One of those.
Right.
All right. Need your opinion on this because I think my partner might be a little bit biased because he jumped on the San Francisco bandwagon before the year started.
All right, I got that one. There's time. There's time.
Rams 49ers tonight. Who should Eagle fans be rooting for if we want to separate ourselves from the rest of the NFC? Do you want to see San Francisco get buried at 2-1, at 1-3, or have them both sitting at 2-2 with a San Francisco win? Because 49ers have been able to beat the Rams during the regular season. Couldn't beat them in the biggest game last year, but they've kind of owned them in the regular season. How should Eagle rooting interests go tonight for the Monday Nighter?
Are the 49ers favorites in that game?
Yeah, 1.5.
That's mind-boggling. I guess because of the history you just said.
They beat them every time in the regular season.
Yeah, they do. All right. Well, it's week 4. I mean, if you're looking that long term,
yes, of course. Come on, Mosher. It's all about the
49ers.
Super Bowl. We got to put the rest of the NFC in our rearview mirror.
Yeah,
I would
for
say
the Eagles fans out in Arizona, they're already booking their second trip to Arizona coming up.
There you go. Yeah, I would say root for the 49ers. I have a whole lot of respect for them, but once they lost Trey Lance and had to go back to Jimmy Garoppolo, and they have a great defense, but I don't think that they're going to have the same magic that they had last year. I just don't.
Most great stuff. Always a pleasure whenever you come on. Thank you much. Please check out the website, Inside the Birds, and the podcast with Adam Kaplan. Send our regards to Mr. Kaplan. Appreciate you jumping in early today.
All right, fellas. Thanks for having me. Have a good one.